We were talking yesterday on the set in New York about the limit, the $250,000 limit. That could come back. It's growing over how much of the Bush-era tax cuts to extend, just for the middle class or perhaps for the wealthiest Americans as well. Both candidates invoked the 42nd president, Bill Clinton, to frame their strategies yesterday. Take a listen.
I mean, the very idea of raising taxes on small business and job creators at the very time we need more jobs is the sort of thing only an extreme liberal could come up with. This is the sort of thing that used to be in the Democratic Party in the times past. Bill Clinton called himself a new Democrat. He put that behind him. He believed in smaller government, reformed welfare as we knew it, and tried to get the economy going with trade and other provisions, lowered taxes. Look, new Democrats have done some good things. A lot of Republicans have done some good things. But this old-style liberalism of bigger and bigger government and bigger taxes has got to end, and we will end it in November.
Anybody making over $250,000 a year, including me, we'd go back to the tax rates that we were paying under Bill Clinton, which, by the way, was a time when our economy created nearly 23 million new jobs, the biggest budget surplus in history, and created plenty of millionaires to boot.
You know, Mika, I got a couple of thoughts. First of all, back in 1999,
yes,
right, when we were all going down and we'd filled the tidal basin with kerosene, and we were dipping our torches in to make that walk up to the Capitol and impeach Bill Clinton. I never thought a Republican would be invoking the good old days of Bill Clinton, but much has changed in 13 years.
It's a strange world.
It's a strange world. That's what 8 years of George Bush deficits will do for you. But secondly, were I Barack Obama, I might not bring up Bill Clinton and tax cuts, because Bill Clinton is, of course, the guy that said we need to cut corporate taxes. Bill Clinton's the guy that says we don't need to raise taxes on anybody. I think said that to Harvey on CNN. It's a tougher pull for him.
I wonder what Bill Clinton would think of what the president is proposing right now, and perhaps maybe it's a very good idea for him to invoke his name and say nice things about Bill Clinton right now. Just talk about how much he loves Bill Clinton, and then tell him to keep his mouth shut, Michael Steele.
Yeah, well, no, I think that's a fair point. I'm intrigued by the whole idea of this conversation to begin with. This invocation of Bill Clinton is nice, but what they fail to acknowledge is that what spurred that growth that they're talking about was not the tax rates that the top earners were paying, was the cut in capital gains that spurred those owners of industry and small businesses to go and invest in that economy that was being created and supplant or supported by welfare reform and the like. So you've got to look at the total package of what Bill Clinton did. He cut spending, working with Newt Gingrich in the Republican House at the time. They cut the capital gains as they increased the rates for top earners to 39%. But keep this point in mind. Taxes for the top rate earners go up to 43% beginning next year anyway. So now you're talking about, if you want to take that number higher, you're talking close to 50% for those top earners if he gets his way, if the president gets his way.
You know, and of course, Mike, we don't know what's going to happen. There's going to be a grand compromise. What I don't understand, though, and I didn't understand before, when the president had a chance 2 years ago to raise taxes on millionaires, or at least take that as his position, he passed it. He let that go by. I don't understand why he's not starting at $1 million just for purely political purposes, because there are a lot of people up in Massachusetts right now who are trying to decide between candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown, who are going to say, I make $250,000, I got 6 employees, if they raise my taxes, I'm going to have to let somebody go.
Joe, I mean, you happen to be right on point here on your first day back, coming right out of the block, throwing fastballs, because
that's shocking for any day that I'm here. That's shocking.
Suck up, just talk.
Well, look, you know, first of all, I don't understand the same thing, but I don't understand it because I don't know enough about it. But I'm wondering whether this insistence on the president's part that the ceiling be $250,000 rather than $1 million. I'm wondering a couple of things about it. Why so many Democrats want the ceiling at $1 million rather than the president's insistence on $250,000. And I'm wondering if the insistence on $250,000 comes out of focus group information that the campaign is conducting rather than sitting down and figuring out the best economic policy for this country. That, I think, is going to be a big question that's going to have to be answered in the next several weeks.
I think the reason why, Andrea, Claire McCaskill is campaigning across Missouri, and I'll guarantee you, because I always found them, there are people who make $200,000, $250,000, $300,000. They may have 3, 4, 5 employees, and you know the little nerds that write the columns that go, well, only 2% of the people actually file as small business owner. No, but that's out of the real world. It doesn't matter how they file their taxes as a business. It's still out of their pocket because they're sole proprietors, whether, however they file it, however they give their money to the IRS. So a tax increase takes away from their bottom line regardless. And so
and you have the other argument as well that those 2 or 3% are actually more of the job creators in those small businesses. Look, you've got Claire McCaskill, you've got Bill Nelson, John Tester, and Chuck Schumer representing people in New York, and he says, you know, people living in New York make $250,000. Their expenses are huge, and they're not just business people. There are people who actually make that amount of money in 2-income families.
And Jonathan, well, I'm sorry.
I want to ask what these job creators have been doing with these tax cuts so far, and how their situations have been improved greatly, and how they're hiring so many people, and now this would all stop.
We're talking about
it's ridiculous.
We're talking about no. It's not ridiculous.
They haven't worked. Have they worked?
We're talking about people right now. We're not talking about millionaires plus.
I know.
We're talking about people
and I would
making
prefer that to
$250,000, $300,000, $340,000 who are struggling to keep their businesses open. They're not creating jobs right now. They're struggling to keep their businesses open.
So these tax cuts put in place by Bush haven't really worked.
Well, the tax cuts put in place by Bush and forwarded by President Obama. These are really Obama tax cuts. They haven't
really spurred growth, have they?
Well, we're going through a terrible stretch right now. The question is, when you're sick, how much
medicine? How much medicine? They did get us out of the recession of 2001, though.
Applies to tax cuts, but it doesn't apply to the deficit and to spending.
Yeah, but 2007
because I think the liberal argument, or the Democrats would argue, you don't, cut spending on certain programs when we're in such a bad situation. So, same argument.
On the $250,000 versus $1 million threshold, I'm going to add on to what Barnacle said, and I wonder if this is ultimately a negotiating position. With the president saying $250,000,
it'll end up
at $1 million. And the other thing, in terms of taxes, there's a story on the second page 2 of the Washington Post. Federal tax rates hit 30-year low in 2009. And it's a combination of data. Congressional Budget Office data, and this is a result of 2 things. One, tax cuts put in place by President Obama in his first year in office, but also a reduction in the amount of income by the wealthiest earners. So when
their incomes dropped so quickly,
incomes dropped by, I think it says here, income fell 12% on average from 2007 to 2009. Now, so when Republicans go out there and say that the president wants to jack up taxes and raise taxes on the middle class and raise taxes on everyone. Here you have the story. The president and the administration has been saying over and over,
but Jonathan,
we've cut taxes. Here's a Congressional Budget Office report that shows that.
And he can go out and say that, but to the woman that owns a small business in Claire McCaskill's home state that makes made $265,000 last year, and her receipts are down because the economy's struggling, she doesn't care what the CBO says. She knows that she can't stand. And you may be right. This may be ultimately a negotiation, but this president's been the campaigner in chief for the past year. I'm not even asking a policy question this morning. I'm asking a political question. Why in July would you put targets on the backs of a lot of small business owners instead of just doing what Chuck Schumer's been saying all along? Put it $1 million. And then we're not even having this conversation. We're still talking about Bryce Harper dropping the ball.
And particularly, Justin.
Let's change that subject.
But I want to go back to Jonathan, because that's you bring up a very good point, and we can debate the CBO numbers.
But
why?
To answer your political question, I think it goes back to what I said before. I wonder if it's part of a negotiating position. No matter what the president proposes, he puts the Republicans on the defensive. They have to come back and say, well, no, we're not going to do what you want to do, whether it's 250,000 or $1 million. And as we've seen since at least 2010, when the new Congress came in, Republicans on Capitol Hill aren't going to do anything.
Mike Barnicle, if I were a Republican on the campaign trail right now, I would have said 3 weeks ago I didn't have a whole lot to campaign on other than overblown rhetoric. I can now talk about the Obama health care tax. I don't care what Mitt Romney's stupid people said. Obama passed, and it's the law of the land, a health care tax.
They messed that up.
And Obama is now passing, trying to push again, a small business tax. I've got 2 taxes. That's all I'm talking about in my district between now and the campaign, and I kick any Democrat in a swing district across America legislatively. Romney can't do this, but legislatively, this seems like the president's hurting his own cause.
Well, unless you consider the fact that the 2 words that you just used, or that have been thrown around the table in the past 2 minutes, both have incendiary value to voters. One word is taxes, has incendiary value to voters. The other word is millionaire. Has incendiary value to many voters. So you use those 2 words, both sides use those words, and let's see where the fire starts burning most fiercely.
Mike,
that's my point. If he had made it a millionaire's tax, Barack Obama wins going away, and the Republicans are sitting there looking like defenders of the rich and wealthy. And Michael Steele, that's my whole point. If Obama says if the president says we're gonna make those millionaires that got away with so much over the past decade pay their fair share. I am ending the Bush tax cuts for millionaires. By the way, this is Chuck Schumer's position. And by the way, politically, this is the position, by the way, that politically I've been advocating for the president for 2 years now, even though I disagree with it politically. And he still insists on going down to 250 with the small business owners.
I don't understand why he wants to relitigate this, because this $1 million threshold has been on the table for a long time. This is not something new the president suddenly stumbled into. He's picked a fight, I think, unnecessarily on the heels of the health care vote. Now, as you've aptly put it,
you agree with me, Michael? As a Republican, if the president made this a millionaire's tax, Republicans would be screwed.
It would be a much harder slog for the GOP
well, it
on
may
that.
get there.
Absolutely.
Well,
I think so.
They think that by separating this and saying that it is a millionaire's tax, what they think the advantage that they're getting is we're giving a tax cut to the middle income folks and forcing the Republicans to defend a millionaire's tax. I mean, that is their calculus.
Why don't you start at $1 million instead of $250,000?
Well,
and this idea of negotiating up doesn't, I don't think
Michael,
it gains you any ground there.
No.
And Joe, is you're poking holes at a very good strategy, and you're finding one thing wrong with it.
No, I'm not.
The bottom line is this whole thing plays into the president's
other thing you're going to see
message perfectly.
No, a
Fair
millionaire's
shot,
tax,
equality, protecting the middle class, and quite frankly, who is Mitt Romney, and why won't he reveal his tax?
There are a lot of small business owners who believe that they make $250,000. They employ five.
There's a lot of people
They
who think
employ 5 or 6
$250,000 is a
people.
lot of money.
Well, exactly, but they employ 5 or 6 people. They make $250,000. They live in New York, or they live in Washington, or they live in San Francisco, or they live in Philadelphia, or they live in Baltimore, or they live in Charlotte. They don't feel rich.
But to Joe's
they feel lucky. Like my dad felt lucky. My dad made a couple $100,000 a year, and he felt like he was the luckiest guy on earth as a small business owner at the end.
To your point, there's going to be another test today on the House floor of whether Democrats in swing districts are going to stick with the president, and that's on the health care.
Explain that.
Well, the Republicans are forcing this vote, which is purely symbolic. It's all politics. A vote on repealing health care. They know they can't win it, not with the Senate, not with the president holding a veto if anything even were to get to his desk, which it's not going to get to his desk. But they're forcing a lot of Democrats to take an uncomfortable vote against what is, in some districts, an unpopular health care law.
What, Jonathan?
I see it as setting up the Republicans to look obstructionist again and waste time.
I hate to sound like a broke Jonathan, because I don't know. Mike answer, if you have the answer, or Jonathan answer, Andrea, whomever. I don't mean to sound like a broken record here. Why not make your life easier? Why not help Claire McCaskill? Why not help John Tester? Why not help moderate Democrats across America and set the limit at $1 million instead of $250,000.
That's a question for the administration, but clearly the administration, the re-election campaign has information that shows them that $250,000 and the overall message of what Mika was talking about before about fairness and income inequality and protecting the middle class, that overall message plays better and helps.
That does a trick politically. $250,000 is just as good for them as $1 million. Is that what you're saying?
It has to be, because the president has been harping on the $250,000 threshold, not just today, but he's been on this for at least a year.
Mike, would you agree that $250,000, the White House probably has polling that shows that $250,000, even if you're a small business owner living in Boston and you have 5 or 6 employees, is rich?
Yes. I think it's coming out of stuff like polling and focus group data. Yeah, I absolutely do. Unless the end game is for him to publicly put it on the Republicans at some point in August or early September when Congress is reconvened, saying, okay, fine, they want $1 million, I'll give you $1 million. You have to give us, the Democrats, the middle class, why? You have to do this. You want your $1 million? Here's what the middle class really needs. And see what they do then.
And then I believe he would look like he's willing to compromise.
Yes.
Which is a great strategy.
You know what, Mika?
What?
He's only one man. He's only he's only one man. He's only the president. He's perfect, isn't he? How could he be so perfect? How could he?
You just know I'm right. Coming up, Democratic political strategist James Carville